Hey everyone, welcome back to the Red Sofa here at Finished Vehicle Logistics North America, where I'm joined by Todd Myers, who's leading vehicle logistics as well as logistics procurement across functions for Nissan North America. Todd, so pleased you can be with us. And in our session today, we were focusing on procurement and strategies for that. And you put a lot of emphasis on total delivered cost and how we need to really think in the total delivered cost sense. Can you tell us a little bit about what that means and looks like in practice at Nissan?
Yeah, absolutely. So, when you look at total delivered cost, you're looking at everything basically on a CPU basis, which is across all of the different functional pillars. Typically logistics is looking at it like an LCPU. Logistics only in a silo, and then on the commercial side, you're looking at rate. But really, when you look at TDC and you look at the total CPU, you're making the best overall decision for the business and not just relative to your individual KPI. You're really trying to optimize cost across all those different aspects.
Yeah, and that's making sure that you don't reduce one that could have a negative impact on another, for example.
Exactly, and you're really tied into the operational levers that go along with that as well.
Yeah, and your role is unique compared to many in the industry. As I mentioned, you're overseeing the vehicle logistics network and operations, but also the procurement, not just for outbound, inbound service parts as well. Tell us a little bit about what that structure looks like, or what that means for how you run the business, and what are some of the advantages that it brings.
Yeah, I think the big advantage is on the operational side, you're responsible for the P&L. When you're looking at it from a procurement standpoint, you're responsible for really cost reduction and the sourcing side, but it can be done in a silo. So from an operational standpoint, we basically look across all of the indices across the business operationally, how are we performing and what the cost impact is. So, you kind of go through like an FTA at the beginning of the year and you look at what all the contributors are, their weighting, and then how do you go about attacking that problem. And for us, it's just really had a lot of dividends, and we really are able to support, I think, the business a lot better with the synergies that we have now.
Absolutely, and it's a situation where you need to operate and make work what you procure and engineer. So you see directly the fruits of the labor, so to speak.
Absolutely, and we've seen this relationships strengthen as a result of it too, and that's really what it's all about. Just like the prior panelists were talking about, the importance of having those strong relationships to kind of be able to adapt and be flexible, in times of change.
One of the things we also addressed in the panel talking about procurement is the role that digitalization and tools are also playing within the RFQ and procurement process. Can you give us a little bit of a sense of what that's looking like in your team? Are you using new tools to expand reach, to be able to manage more bids, for example?
Yeah, so we're using some new tools, and it's absolutely helped us with new options that we didn't previously have. You're also able to process things quicker. You're also able to process a lot more data. But, when you're looking across the total TDC spectrum and you're looking across every single data facet that's, collected operationally, when you're trying to go after CPU, we're still developing that. We have a lot of data scientists we brought in, and really, utilizing the domain expertise that we have in the business, plus the digital skills to really try to make that end-to-end procurement optimized for us. So it's still, it's a journey. It's not really a destination. It's always going to evolve. But I think, the data analytics have absolutely helped us.
Absolutely. That's great. We put a lot of focus on long-term partnerships, and that both sides, OEM, suppliers, want that. But we also, as we've talked about across this event, see a lot of changes that are coming fast. Costs change quickly, market shifts, technology shifts. How can you account for that better in a long-term partnership? Does it mean a change in the way the contractor structures? Is there different ways of organizing these sort of partnerships?
Yeah, so I think really from a contractual standpoint, you have to keep the thing simple, to where you can manage it and then have the discipline and the accountability to go and do and measure what you say you're going to do in the contract. Too often I think that contracts can get convoluted, with changes over time, and they get very difficult to interpret, difficult to manage. And I kind of in my mind, look at it like having a gym membership as an example. And, when we start going to the gym, we have one kind of specific routine. We're going after a different goal, but those long-term contracts and partnerships, over time, that workout routine changes, and we just have to allow the framework for us to be able to communicate those changes. The gym's still the same, but ultimately how you're achieving your business grows and evolves.
Yeah, absolutely. And an important point of that as well is how you measure success or measure the the success of the partnership. There's obviously performance measurements and KPIs. But an important point that you raised, and I'd like to talk about with our audience, is how do you create measurements and KPIs that can be leading rather than lagging? So how can you start to pick up any signs of stress or problems rather than see them after they hit you already?
Yeah, again, it gets into kind of your forecasting and understanding. It's really short-term predictive analytics. It's not really long-term, right? That's what everybody would love to have, but it's really not feasible. But there's so many metrics right now that are not tied together from an operational excellence standpoint that do give you leading indicators to really understand how to perform better. And then also on the carrier side of it, or the rail, it's being able to have those conversations with the partners to get them to not only see the data, but also utilize the data, right? We're doing a lot of data, sharing today that we weren't doing several years ago, but you still have kind of an adoption issue to get through. And it's really us as OEMs trying to partner, help more, be more proactive on our side to trying to help educate and utilize that information.
Absolutely. Well, last question. What would you talked about using tools that can expand reach, but and long-term partnership. What advice would you give to carriers, partners who are looking to break into business with Nissan? Where can they start? What should they keep in mind?
So, initially, I think what gets you noticed is always cost, right? And a shiny thing in your eye that gets your attention, but ultimately, you've got to have the performance piece. And like we've said earlier, everything hinges on integrity, trust, transparency. You have to deliver what you commit to, say what you mean what you say. And, ultimately, you can't go out and try to, get more business than you can manage. That's where things tend to run off the rails, where people are very ambitious, but ultimately they don't deliver on what they're, signing up for. And but my advice to them is, be assertive, be aggressive, pursue the OEMs, but also try to work with some partners as well, to get in.
And it's a great point, and important that, as you say, if you maybe attract someone in with the cost, but if you're not able to maintain it, then that's not going to hit the total delivered cost in the right way either.
Exactly, and we want people to be successful, right? It's an enormous amount of effort that goes into bringing a new vendor in, and the last thing that you want to do is have them where they, get into a situation where they can't perform or not execute. Yeah. But it all starts with the integrity, trust, and transparency, because just like we talked about leading indicators, you have to communicate to us when you're having problems. Oftentimes what you have with new vendors is they're not sure what to say and when to say it, and they tend to tell you too late, to where it ultimately, results in a lot of that lost cost.
Yeah. Now, a partnership is bad news first in many cases. That could be an important element of maintaining that. Todd, thank you so much for sharing these insights with us. No, it's always a pleasure. Keep up with us. We'll be sharing more from Finished Vehicle Logistics North America, including the sessions on logistic procurement and partnership, and much more besides that. Thanks very much.